Surprise. I am your new cellmate. And I've come to make your life a living hell. Prepare for a bitter harvest. Winter has come at last.
Arnold Schwarzenegger's Mr. Freeze from 1997's Batman and Robin is arguably the most infamous villain performance in the superhero film genre. Everyone knows about it, everyone has seen it, everyone has attempted to imitate his voice and ice-related puns in some way. It has gone down in the annals of history as one of the true greats of awfulness. When making Batman and Robin, director Joel Schumacher was tasked by Warner Brothers to make the film upbeat, colorful, and toyetic with its visual design, in order to successfully sell action figures and other merchandise upon release. Warner Brothers had taken the Batman film series in a more kid-friendly direction with the previous installment, Batman Forever, after parents backlashed against the darker and gruesome tone of its predecessor, Batman Returns. With Batman and Robin, the fourth film in the franchise, it was rushed into production and the cartoonish and flamboyant approach was dialed up to 11, something Warner Brothers believed was the right way to go. Newsflash, it wasn't. Joel Schumacher drew inspiration from the 1960s Batman TV series when making the story. He decided to include Mr. Freeze in it, a character featured in the show several times, and wanted Arnold Schwarzenegger to portray him, fresh off Eraser and Jingle All the Way, another guilty pleasure Ernie film. Schumacher felt he needed an actor who was built big and strong like a glacier, and Schwarzenegger fit the bill. For the design of the film, he drew from the Dick Sprang era of Batman comics, the 1950s and early 60s, when elements of the Batman mythology were becoming sillier and campier by nature, not only due to the impact of the 1960s Batman show, but also the recently formed Comics Code Authority, which was forcing changes in the medium. Anyways, in Batman and Robin, Mr. Freeze was a cryogenic scientist who was trying to find a cure for his terminally ill wife Nora. He places her in a form of cryostasis until he can find one, but a lab accident resulted in him falling into a pool of sub-zero liquid, mutating his body so that he must remain in a cold environment to survive. To do so, he creates a special suit powered by diamond-enhanced lasers. Thus, he must steal them to act as a fuel source. While I like this idea, making him dependent on something which forces him to perform criminal activities, having your suit be powered by diamonds is something I feel was preventable. He could have made things a lot easier for himself. In the early comics, when Mr. Freeze was known as Mr. Zero, he was a cryoscientist that spilled a freezing agent of his own design on himself and was forced to enter the lab's cold storage, realizing freezing temperatures was the only thing keeping him alive. He also stole diamonds and other similar-looking things, but it was to get rich, not to power his suit. Batman and Robin chase him down with roller skates, similar to what happens during the museum sequence at the beginning of the film, though it's on ice skates and not roller skates, and they play hockey. God, that sounds even dumber out loud. Adding to Mr. Freeze's need for diamonds to power his suit in the film, he also needs larger ones for a freeze engine he has created that will help him cure his wife somehow. Look, they didn't care explaining it, so neither will I. Honestly, despite some of its vague and underdeveloped elements, I still find Mr. Freeze's origin in the film to be decent, all things considered. This movie was modeled after the 1960s Batman TV series. Really, they could have made his motivations a lot weaker than what we got. More like the original comics or something. Much worse. At least they attempted a few other ideas, taking from Batman the Animated Series. They didn't have to, and of course they failed, but at least they tried. I'm sort of glad they put somewhat of an effort in, especially at the time. The scenes where Victor is watching his old wedding videos in silence are quite effective. They are the only strong character moments in the entire film. He sheds a tear, tells himself one more diamond and they can be together again, stuff like that. Honestly, Schwarzenegger does an adequate job here with what he was given. It actually feels like a movie for a bit. It feels like acting.
I hate when people talk during the movie.
By the end of the film, Freeze partners with Poison Ivy, another terrible villain adaptation from this movie. Maybe someday I'll talk about her more in depth. After she unplugs Nora, essentially killing her, and tricks her into believing Batman and Robin were responsible, Freeze becomes enraged and his criminal scheme moves up a gear. Now he wants to blanket Gotham in a layer of ice, and then the rest of the world, killing all mankind. He had mentioned it before as a way of extorting billions from the city by itself so he could complete the research to save his wife. I assume that's where the freezing engine would have come into play before. It would somehow freeze the city and thus save his wife, but it's not explained very well and quickly forgotten about early on. The main reason he does it at the end of the movie is due to revenge. That, and because Poison Ivy wants to repopulate the Earth with mutant plants, but that makes even less sense. This notion of freezing Gotham had been brought up before. Not only was it hinted at during 2 episodes of Batman from the 1960s, Green Ice and Deep Freeze, starring Otto Preminger, but it was also the scheme of Freeze in Batman No. 375 from September of 1984. In the issue, Freeze creates a massive cannon based off his own freezing gun, and intends on using it against the city, testing it on a bank first. In the Batman and Robin film, Freeze repurposes the newly unveiled Wayne Enterprises telescope into a massive cannon, referencing this comic in a way.
The combined power of the telescope's reflecting crystals will complete my freezing engine. Yes. No matter what they tell you, Mr. Bane, it is the size of your gun that counts.
Mr. Freeze's costume in this film has always left me polarized. On one hand, the bulky armored look is quite interesting and reminiscent of many of his designs in the comics that we've seen before and since. The blue neon lighting also provides a cool effect to everything, and as a kid, I loved his costume. It looked really awesome. Maybe I still do deep down, I'll admit it. With that said, it only really works in the universe established in the Joel Schumacher Batman films. Outside of that, it becomes rather impractical, and honestly, as the years progress, this costume seems dumber and dumber. It's definitely a product of its time, used to only sell action figures and not much else.
Can you be cold, Batman? You have 11 minutes to thaw the bird. What will you do? Chase the villain? Or save the boy? Your emotions make you weak. That's why this day's mine. I'll kill you next time.
One costume design I've always had an issue with in this movie, though, is the one he wears while relaxing in his snow cone factory hideout. He wears a bathrobe or housecoat along with polar bear slippers. Honestly, the housecoat was something we've seen before in the comics in the 1960s show, and the polar bear slippers are simply adorable. I don't have a problem with that, who cares? They fit the tone of the movie. But what I do have a problem with is that they have Mr. Freeze smoking cigars, something Schwarzenegger is known for, which is probably why they allowed the character to do it in the film. But I don't think the filmmakers really thought that decision through. Victor Freeze can't survive outside of a Sub-Zero environment. Why in the holy hell would he have a lit flame that close to his body? Wouldn't breathing in the fumes of the cigar heat his lungs or something? Wouldn't his temperature increase? Despite all the hate Batman and Robin gets as a movie, I want to stress that it's far from complete garbage. I've seen a lot worse in the superhero genre, and though it is bad, it's bad in a good way, a fun way. Batman and Robin can be downright hilarious, and whether it's by yourself or with a group of friends, a lot of entertainment can be had with it. It's a glorious piece of crap, definitely not unwatchable or the worst superhero film of all time, like many believe. I'd pop this in and watch it any day because it's fascinatingly terrible. You shouldn't take it too seriously. Embrace the camp factor. In terms of Schwarzenegger's Mr. Freeze, there was a lot of potential with it. I think given a stronger script and better dialogue, he could have made the role even more entertaining than it already was. He's really the saving grace of this movie in a nutshell. In the early comics, Mr. Freeze would say things like, "I will stop you cold," that'll freeze the wealth of Gotham. Even Batman would refer to prison as the cooler. The movie had Freeze speak entirely in puns, so at least 99% of the time, he had barely any normal dialogue to contribute, which was probably the most disappointing all things considered. Tweaking that alone would have moved it all in a better direction, if only a little.
Allow me to break the ice. My name is Freeze. Learn it well, for it's the chilling sound of your doom.